Welcome to the Future of Surrogacy, the podcast that explores the people, the innovations, and the ideas building the next generation of surrogacy. Today's guest is someone I've had the honor of knowing and learning from for years, and someone who has been on the front lines of shaping the legal framework for surrogacy and adoption. With over 20 years of deep expertise in family law, surrogacy, adoption, and assisted reproduction, she is none other than the powerhouse attorney, Kim Surratt. If there is a surrogacy law in Nevada, chances are Kim helped write it, lobby for it, or improve it. She has played a lead role in everything from mandating insurance coverage for surrogacy to rewriting entire statutes to better protect all parties involved. As the founder of Surratt Law Practice, she's licensed in both Nevada and California. But wait, there's more. She served on the board of the Quad A, which for those that don't know, that's the Academy of Adoption and Assisted Reproduction Attorneys. She is a founding member of Nevada's LGBT bar section and has held leadership positions in countless legal organizations focused on justice and access. And she also runs her own podcast, aptly named Surrogacy Warrior. And beyond all that, she's incredibly fun and one of the smartest and most compassionate voices we have when it comes to the future of this field. So welcome to the future of surrogacy, Kim.
Thanks. Well, if anything, you just demonstrated what my paralegal says, which is I need to not volunteer for everything. But the list gets longer, unfortunately.
It is kind of silly for anybody that really wants to see all of the things she's involved in. You can go to her website because there's a full page, and it's probably the most I've ever seen in terms of volunteer work. But it just speaks to how much you care about this, because every time I talk to you about this, you just ooze passion for creating change.
I'm addicted to it. Yeah.
Well, let's start. Can you give us just a quick overview of how surrogacy law is currently structured in the U.S.?
In the U.S., specifically the U.S. So no big surprise, but it's state by state. So across the country, we have different sets of surrogacy laws everywhere. They range from conservative, anti-surrogacy to pro-surrogacy, pro-family formation. The good news is, as of the recent years, there's a lot more states that have shifted from anti-surrogacy to pro-surrogacy. And that list has grown tremendously smaller as far as the bad states go. So we've got a combination of what you can do and not do in different states. The laws are very different in every single state, but you can kind of categorize them by whether or not also, in addition to being pro-surrogacy, whether they're also pro-LGBT community, family formation, or pro-single intended parents versus not. But otherwise, there's been a huge shift. It's amazing. A lot more states are allowing it now.
I have two questions on that. So what are the antis still?
Louisiana, the Deep South, you tend to see anti-surrogacy laws. Really, at this point, that's the key state that we stay away from. We've got two other states who say the contracts are not legal. It doesn't mean we can't do surrogacy or have pro-parentage decisions in those states. Those are Indiana and Arizona. But technically on the books, the surrogacy contracts are not allowed. Michigan was one of our biggest states, and it used to be criminal, and they just passed brand new legislation there. It's going into effect now. It's very exciting. It's no longer on the bad list.
Did you say that's Michigan?
Michigan.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen that all over people's websites. So the biggest gaps or inconsistencies across the states you mentioned. So it's a lot of single parent, LGBTQ, surrogacy contracts involved. Are there other inconsistencies?
There's other, so what is single versus married? So we look at marital status, gender, whether it's gender neutral statute or not, the mechanisms for surrogacy, meaning how complicated is it to get a parentage order or not, depending on where our parents are coming from, their needs, depending if they're coming from another country, they may have a need for a post-birth order. In some states, we can do post-birth orders, and others we can't. Some you can do pre-birth, some you can't. So the mechanisms, the procedural steps change state by state also.
And so this was the second question, but does SEEDS have a map or anything that exists? Because in adoption, there were always maps that you could click on a state and see what was allowed. Is that
Yeah, there's a few state or a few maps available on the internet. One of them is done by an agency, and if you literally put surrogacy map into a Google search engine, you're going to find it. There's a couple of nonprofits that have worked on maps. I can't say they're the greatest of maps. Quad A, Academy of Adoption and Assisted Reproduction Attorneys, has been working hard on theirs. And that I know the resources are solid. They're not putting anything up that isn't.
okay? We'll link any of those that we can find in the show notes too
Yeah.
for people. Okay, so this next question is the one that I think, because every time I've ever talked to Kim about this, like, and I met Kim when I was working on the adoption side of the house, and she would be like, this needs to be done in surrogacy. And so the unethical behavior you see, because I have had conversations with you where you were like, these people might ruin this industry for everyone.
Right.
So what are the types of unethical behavior that you're seeing that you worry about most?
There's two categories. One would be bad behavior within the escrow industry, holding of people's funds for surrogacy journeys. Within that industry, what you see is fraud, misappropriation of funds, theft, flat out theft, hacking. Anything that can happen within the financial industry is at risk, obviously. The ongoing complaint on that side of it is that when you think of escrow, most people, the one thing that's familiar to people with escrow is when you buy a house, right? That industry is highly regulated. It's in every state, there's a high amount and federal level of monitoring over that. Well, in surrogacy, we call it escrow. Also, it's kind of a misuse of the term. It's a term that was, like I said, familiar and regulated within the real estate industry, but within our industry, it's meant to be where intended parents can place money to prove to a surrogate, hey, you're not just going to get pregnant and hope I have the money to pay for the journey, hope I can pay the medical bills. We're going to prove to you that the money is there, it's being held, and it's protected. Problem is, we don't have regulations around that specifically just for the surrogacy industry.
Mm-hmm.
So we have seen several companies go under with theft by the owners, by other employees, where the money just disappeared and the safeguards were not in place. Not that any bank account can't get tapped, right?
Right.
Hacked into and money stolen. Everybody's bank accounts are at risk of that. But this is particularly vulnerable because you've got an industry, a company that is unregulated, often monitoring that money. So we're seeing lots of bad actors there. One of the most recent ones that went down is called SEAM, Surrogacy Escrow Account Management was their name. And the owners stole the money and millions were gone. They had been doing it on an ongoing basis and consistent in a way where it's like borrow from the next set of intended parents to pay what bills needed to be paid, but money was really going out at a faster rate than it
Like
was
Ponzi
coming in.
scheme style?
Yeah, a little bit.
That's like
But
Bernie
really,
Madoff.
at the end of the day, they just took the money. I mean, they just flat took the money out of the accounts. And a lot of intended parents were left without their entire funds for their journey gone and unrecovered. There was a judicial decision just recently for a payback of $1 million on that, but that's nowhere near the amount of money that disappeared. So
Wow.
it's not sufficient to make people whole. And there's just that ongoing distrust, of what to do. There's one particular company who has really stepped up to the plate, who's really started to try to fix things in this industry, try to do things right, but they're still just so new. When you talk about most of these states have adopted friendlier statutes and laws, they've done so in the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And in the legal world, that's brand spanking new because a
Baby
lot of
laws.
laws that we're working off of came from the United Kingdom. They came across the seas with us. So, laws created in the 2000s, an industry that really grew mostly in the 2000s. It did start in 1990s, but, the greatest growth has been past 10, 15 years. We don't have the rules in place that we need. So that's one of it.
Wait,
Yeah,
before we
certainly
go to the
limit.
next one, who is the company that's stepping up trying to do a good
Oh,
job?
Seed Trust
Oh yeah,
is
okay.
really the only one that at this moment, I mean, there's a couple other smaller companies that are doing work, but the largest one doing the greatest amount of work right now is Seed Trust.
And if you're an agency that's trying to figure out who to use as an escrow partner, how would you go about trying to find out who a good one is?
Well, there are materials out there that different lawyers and different groups have created with checklists for people. But one of the things that you're really looking at is what is protecting the money that they are taking. That is not just the FDIC
Right.
coverage on the account, right? That there are bonds in place and protections in place for not just the bank goes down, but also fraud and theft from employees within the company and
Hmm.
criminal activity. So you want to look at what they have protecting that money and kind of the basis of how many clients do they have. And when they say they have this much money, but how much money are they holding compared to how much protection do they have?
Hmm.
Right? Because you can have $1 million and only have a couple of clients. Great, that covers them, but when you have thousands of clients and only $1 million, that doesn't protect them. So much deeper protections are being put in place now. I know C-Trust has worked hard at trying to figure out what those are with the banking industry in general, about what can be done to show in good faith who they are and what they are, and what they're doing with the money and more transparency. But I don't think it's perfect yet.
Yeah.
But if there's somebody I trust, it's them. But there are a couple other smaller ones that I think are doing a good job, but
Okay.
scale can mean a lot as far as number of eyes on you and protections.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. This is just a total side note, but when that Silicon Valley Bank went under a couple of years
Mhm.
ago, all of Pear Tree's money was there.
Oh
And
yeah,
so, yeah, overnight it was like $4 million were gone,
just gone. Yeah.
gone. Yeah. And so I was like, I don't know if we have a company anymore.
Yeah. Well,
So,
that's exactly like this. I mean, some people look at this industry and say, well, people who do surrogacy have tons of money. It's not true. It
yeah.
is absolutely not true. So many of my clients have scraped together every penny
Hmm.
to be able to do this. They have borrowed from family and friends. They have
Hmm.
cashed out retirement. They've sold their homes, or taken loans against their homes. They have done some crazy financial things to get to a spot where they could do this. Yes, there's a handful of my clients who just are financially well off and self-financing it and have it right in the bank, but so few of them do. So when you put all of your eggs in one basket and put it in that account and it all disappears, just like what you said, I don't know if I have pear tree anymore. That's all these people are looking and saying, I don't, my dream of a child is gone.
Hmm.
And the other problem with that was a lot of these people had journeys already in motion
Underway.
and they
Yeah.
had surrogates pregnant already. And so they had no choice but to contractually still pay the surrogate despite the money being gone. And we had a lot of very kind, lovely women as surrogates who negotiated and worked with their intended parents on how to make that happen because they didn't just have the money available overnight and ready for them immediately.
Yeah. That is a big one. Okay, so that was unethical, big issue number one. What do you think is number two?
Number two is just the on the matching program side of it. So these companies that are matching intended parents with surrogates. The quality is varied across the country. We have only one state, New York, who has actually put in a structure for licensing for agencies,
Hmm.
but all the other states have not. And so there is no licensing body for these agencies, which for a lot of people just dumbfounds people. They just go, what are you talking about? Because
Yeah.
in your gut, from an outsider's perspective looking in, you think, well, of course they're regulated. Everything else is in the world is regulated. You can't open a restaurant without a ton of rules, right? You can't open a gas station without following a lot of rules, but you can help create human beings without rules.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
every other
uh,
family building path is
every other family
highly regulated.
highly regulated. And again, it's not that we don't lack regulations from a bad reasoning.
Mhm.
It's, again, how new we are, how
Mhm.
fast it grew. It just popped up and grew like wildfire
Mhm.
across the board. And there wasn't time. I mean, it just happened without enough time. And if anybody's done anything at a legislative level with their government, nothing happens fast. I mean, it is excruciatingly slow and painful to make sausage at the legislature, and it's not an overnight process. And so I think the day's coming. It will happen, because what you see is people forming companies who either were intended parents or they were a surrogate, and they
Mhm.
turned around and said, now I'm an expert. Now I can run a company. And now they're trying to run a company. Not that every company that does matching who was a surrogate is bad. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying that there are quite a few bad ones who just had zero business skills, and bad things happen. It's inconsistencies, and just, well, some of it's theft on the part of the owners
Yeah.
too. It's because no one has a good way of screening or understanding who they're working with. People just make an assumption that they're somehow regulated, so they're not checking things like business licenses and liability insurance and that type of stuff. There are groups trying to work against that, meaning trying to up the standards and the ethics. And the one in particular is Seeds Ethics, which is, not to get mixed up with Seed Trust, it's a constant issue with their names, but it's Society of Ethics in Egg Donation and Surrogacy. So Seeds has tried to start to work on standards for these companies who are doing this matching work, and try to figure out how can we create our own standards, our own ethics, to show we're abiding by them. And so if you're a member of Seeds, you have to sign off saying, I'll abide by this set of standards and ethics in order to be a member. Now, if they're not a member, it doesn't mean they're necessarily unethical, but if they are a member, it doesn't mean they haven't done something bad either. They just may not have been caught yet. I mean, but it's an attempt.
I was talking to an agency the other day, and they were kind of ratting out another agency to me. But I was like, well, what about Seeds? Like, I mean, that is so clearly against the rules. And they're like, Seeds offers guidelines, and they were of the mind, at least, that there is no kind of repercussions at this point, other than, you could get a bad Google review. Again, because there's no regulations, there's no oversight. Like, no one is coming and removing an agency's license,
Yeah,
because there are
there's
no
no
licenses.
license to be removed. Membership from Seeds potentially could be removed. They're having to work on that process
Yeah.
too, to figure out what that looks like. Because again, everybody's so new. But you're right. There's no that you committed a legal infraction like you would with an adoption agency. If they didn't follow certain rules, their license could be ripped and they could never do another adoption ever again.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist in this industry.
Yeah. So are you of the mindset, you kind of alluded to it, and I'm of the mindset that it will happen, but are you of the mindset that it will become the amount of licensing and regulation that adoption has, that every state would probably create their own laws and agencies will have to apply?
It will come, it will happen.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's done much more thoughtfully. I do think we will end up there. Hopefully we end up there, much more thoughtful process and mechanism. Groups like the American Bar Association have tried to create a model act for a regulatory body, or mechanism for that. And, lawyers are looking at it. They're looking at ways to structure something that people could take as a template from state to state and start to try to see what they can do. It's hard because you don't want them to ruin our industry with regulation, because,
Mhm.
we act like government involvement is the solution, but a lot of times it's not.
Right.
So hopefully it's done thoughtfully. And if anything, yeah, Seeds is a guidance, but they're at least attempting something
Totally.
for an approach to it. And getting it right's hard, because kind of backpedals into what we talked about in the beginning. Every state's so different in how they're doing surrogacy. It's hard to take the same model state by state.
Yeah. Let's go back to, because you mentioned, and I know you and I have had conversations about this because you kind of blew my mind one time. And this was like 2 years ago, but the screening part of it, because I think you were like, there's no consistency in screening or regulations around who has to be screened and how extensive the screening is, both on the surrogate side and IPs. But now that I've been at Simbi for a while and I'm seeing how agencies are approaching screening, at least on the surrogate side,
Mhm.
it doesn't seem like there's background checks.
There is. I mean, again, your quality is going to vary. And so when I talk to people about how do you screen for a company that you want to work with, you want one that's doing background checks. And they're doing them more frequently on surrogates than they are on intended parents. And if anything, we have a new scandal right now that's happening that demonstrates it needs to be done on intended parents also. Not that background check's foolproof. It's not going to necessarily find the bad actors that haven't been caught yet, right?
Right.
A background check finds people that got caught being bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is a difference, but you're right. I mean, there's just no consistency. Every agency can do the amount of screening they want to do. And, you know, if they're going to survive and they're going to grow and they're going to have a good reputation and they're going to get more clients and not have bad reviews, or it's not even Yelp reviews anymore. It's the Facebook pages
Yeah.
that will, put them in their grave.
Yes.
But if they're going to do that, then they're going to need to do a decent amount of screening. Now, when people look at companies they want to work with, I always tell them you need to talk to that company, that potential company that you may want to work with, and say, when do you do the screening? Are you doing it before you hand me a pile of profiles? Or
Mhm.
is it after I say, I really like the look of this person on paper, and then you go check up on
Mhm.
them? Because somebody could say, well, I have 100 surrogates available. Well, is it 100 surrogates that have gone through their background checks,
Fully vetted.
pulled their medical records? You've done at least some basic screening,
Mhm.
right? So the quality of what you're looking at, that's the issue, is you're looking at these companies saying, when and at what point in time are you doing these steps, and what steps are you doing? Because they need to be doing a lot at this point. And the good companies are like, oh my goodness. Even when you talk to one that I think is a really good company and they're really doing a good job, they're like, I still didn't, I asked about criminal background. I did a background check, but I didn't ask them if they were pending any criminal charges. I'm like, well, there's your loophole, right?
Yeah.
Not that they're going to tell you the truth, but if you don't ask, you don't know what you're going to get,
Yeah.
right? But this is the issue, is that we don't do anywhere near what we do in adoption, which is a home study on intended parents. We don't dig into the personal lives at that great of a level. There's some human rights elements to that. There's the issue of, well, anybody can just go get pregnant and have a baby, but because I struggle to have a baby and I have to go through these extra steps, you're going to extra scrutinize me.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but we justify it in adoption because we're saying you're taking a third party stranger's child into your home, and we're not about to do that unless we know you're a good human being,
Yeah.
right? In this scenario, it's the same thing. While the genetics might be yours, the embryo might be yours genetically, the issue is that you're working with a third person, a surrogate, and she needs to know that you're a good person before
Mhm.
she spends the next year intimately involved with you, in a way that she's never been involved with somebody else, creating a human being for you.
Definitely.
You can get around those arguments, but then the question is just, how do we get to the information to avoid the fraud, to avoid the problems? Because it's not always the companies that are the bad actors. I mean, I talked about good versus bad companies that are regulated versus not, or doing a good job or not, but there's still people slipping through the cracks who are bad people. And that's all industries, but this is ripe for it. Surrogates see the dollar signs, they want the money. Not all of them are doing it for money by any means, but the ones that don't pass screening because they failed, they're probably after the money, and they're agency hopping is what we call it,
Oh, totally.
and moving on to the next one to see, and now they know the right things to hide from that company.
Mhm.
because they failed on the last one. And so now they know what they're supposed to do and not do.
I want to create for surrogacy what we did for the adoption, where you can centralize all the people that have been disqualified. And I know that there's some privacy rights there, so we'd have to figure that out. But yeah, I mean, if I was a potential surrogate and I got denied at your agency, then I'd go to another agency and do exactly what you just said. Or I'd just try to find match independently.
Or independent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of the problem. So, when I consult with people who are trying to do it independent, they're like, I found somebody else on the internet. I'm like, okay, wait a minute, slow your roll. Let's triple check why they're suddenly available for you on the internet.
Yeah.
It's not that easy. It's not a just quick, oh, well, I have 10 people. I'm sure you think you have 10 people. I've never asked, I have, but I don't know the exact numbers from agencies of how many potential applicants they go through to get down to one, right?
Oh, I do have those numbers.
You know those numbers?
Yeah, I mean, and it depends on the agency size, but typically it what we're seeing averaging out to like well under 10%
Yeah,
are
I'm
qualified.
not surprised at all, or
Yeah.
anywhere near going to the next stage, right?
Yep.
And then there's still more stages. So, these companies, they're putting a lot of money into this effort, and it's not easy, and they're expensive, and I get it. But, when you think about how people are willing to lie, and because anybody can fill a form in on the internet, it doesn't get them to the next stage.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so how does that manifest itself when it gets to your stage? Like, are you seeing, I mean, contracts are just, or relationships are just falling apart because if if an agency hasn't done a suitable background check on a surrogate and or an IP, like once it gets to the contracting stage, families are just more invested and even more sad when it falls apart? Or is that something that you see happen a lot, or it's more so just
Yeah, well, break it out from the independents versus the ones with companies, right? The independents, some of them have failed with companies to get a surrogate, to get matched, etc. And so they're getting frustrated. I have a single intended father in Nevada who has called me for multiple years now, going, I think I have another one that he keeps trying to find on the internet. And I'm like, what about this, or this? And he's like, no. I'm like, you don't have another one, and so it's just a constant, he's not getting anywhere, right? So it's just spinning and spinning. Some of those people, I can tell them to do their background checks, I can tell them to do, X, Y, and Z. And at some point I have to decide, like, am I willing to do the contract or not, depending on what steps they did or didn't take, or were willing to take or not take. That's a struggle for a lawyer, because it's, you've got people happy and ready to move in front of you. The clinic has approved them. They're ready. And am I going to destroy it for them? Now, most people I can talk into the background check. I can talk into doing certain basics, but other people I can't. And do I just refuse to do the contract? Do they go on to another attorney who doesn't really know surrogacy in the same way, who's willing to do it anyways? And I could have at least done a better job of drafting the contract and
right?
protecting them. It's a hard call for me as a lawyer. It's a constant battle with those ones.
Yeah.
With the agency end of it, I'm not seeing them constantly fall apart. Where we see them constantly falling apart is in the news. The bad cases that are horrific and they're horrid, But I'm also tending to say no to certain agencies who I just don't feel are being ethical, and I don't
Mm.
want work from them. I can say no to just about anybody in that scenario and walk away from it and just not take the work. And unfortunately, I do see the other lawyers with my, similar licenses pick up the work and do it. And I'm thinking to myself, I just hope you don't get burned at some point. Everybody's desperate to want to do this area of law. I've been doing it so long I don't have to. But are they devastated when it falls apart at my stage? It doesn't usually fall apart at my stage. At my stage, they're so far gone that we're doing the match, But
Yeah.
I get calls on fix-it cases where it's, we think this one agency or this one lawyer is involved in something bad, and I start kind of basically consulting on what are we going to do to figure out if something's going bad there or not.
Mm.
So
Would an IP choose an independent journey versus an agency journey for the same reasons that they do an adoption, where it's typically cost related? That they okay,
cost, or they might pick independent if they have a family or a friend who's willing to carry for them, which, I mean, why would you go pay an agency to
yeah, it's
match
already
you?
matched, and
But I mean, we've been pushing on these agencies that they need to create packages that are minus the matching part of it so
right,
they can still help manage the journey, still help through the rest of the process. But when it's your sister, I mean, it's just probably not going to happen that way, right?
yeah.
You're probably going to go independent and all the way and not
That's
do any of
interesting,
the.
yeah, because that exists. Those packages exist in adoption and have for a long time in terms of we can just do the home study or we can just do post or
They do. I can tell you, and they're still overcharging. They're trying to make up for their other expenses. I get it. Their whole process is very expensive, but if people can't afford it, they can't afford it,
I
you know.
know. Oh, I know.
And to give some credit to the companies, it's like, well, you're bringing me somebody that I haven't vetted as, because
Yeah,
their vetting isn't just their background, it's also like who they are as a human being, and will they comply with doctor's orders? Will they jump when I say jump? And they're like, you're bringing me a rando person who I've got to hope it doesn't create a complete nightmare for my staff
yeah,
trying to get her to do the right things because you swear she's a good person, right?
yeah.
So I get it. And everybody just knows you're taking some risks with the independents that you aren't taking with the ones that you took through your A to Z process that you knew well.
Yeah. So for professionals, because this podcast is more geared towards professionals. So Seeds and Quad A, are those the two organizations that everyone should belong to or at least be referencing when it comes to guidelines and or is there anybody else?
Also, American Society for Reproductive Medicine,
ASRM.
ASRM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, I mean, there's some others for the doctors,
Yeah.
Eshery and a couple others, but I mean, I would say that, that's your core. You're going to Quad A for the list of attorneys who Quad A vets all of their fellows to determine if they have sufficient experience in assisted reproduction or adoption. And you have to have so many cases, and they talk to all your references. And so you're getting somebody who actually
Yeah.
knows reproductive law. And then Seeds, you're hoping like they at least are attempting to comply with the standards that Seeds has put forth and better than nothing. And if they have tried to become a member of Seeds and have been denied, there's a reason.
Is that public for people that have tried and been denied?
No, I don't think so.
Hmm.
But some people brag that they're like, well, I don't like steeds because they think this is a good standard and it's not.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I won't be a member of them, that kind of a thing. And then the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, lawyers can be a part of that. They have some other membership levels, but in the basic level of if you have a reproductive endocrinologist who's not a member of ASRM, that's strange.
That's a red flag. Yeah.
That's a red flag. But ASRM has their own standards that they're creating. And so when people get upset that their surrogate was denied to be a surrogate, it's understanding and really looking at what those medical standards are as to why and how they're screening people out medically.
That's what we're using at SIMBI is the ASRM guidelines for when agencies use SIMBI to screen their surrogates. It's ASRM guidelines.
Yeah. And that's standard. It's what people should be doing.
Yeah.
I can't say they've got it perfect. They're like everybody else, still trying to modify, still trying to figure out what that looks like and update their standards when they can and what they need to do to modernize for certain things.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to keep you too long. I've got two more questions. Second to last question is birthright citizenship.
Oh, God, that's a big one. What do you want to know?
Well, how do you see it? How do you see it playing out in surrogacy?
You've got two options. Either we have it or we don't at the end of the day. In the interim between now and having that final decision, we have it sometimes and we don't other times in some states and not in others. So don't worry about the interim right now. It's a disaster. But at the end of the day, we have one of two things. If we have birthright citizenship, we stay the course, everything's the same, nothing changes for us. If we do not have birthright citizenship, then What we have to do is we look at the country where our intended parents are coming from. Now, first off, none of our intended parents, and I shouldn't say none, but they make it sound like people are doing this just to gain U.S. citizenship for their babies. That is not true. That is not what we're doing. The mechanism we use to get people home right away is the child's U.S. passport, because the child was born on U.S. soil, so the child is a U.S. citizen. But we are not stopping there. These children are gaining citizenship in their home country of their intended parents. And so we use it because we can get a passport right away using their U.S. birth certificate, get the passport, get them home. The difference will be if we don't have birthright citizenship, we still do surrogacy. It's just that if we can't gain citizenship fast enough for the intended parents, then we need to deter them from doing surrogacy in the United States. Meaning, can they sustain being here a little bit longer before they go home so that we can get the child citizenship in that home country and then have the child travel home on a passport or travel documents from that country.
I see.
And so it'll be a country by country analysis as to what we can and can't do. For some countries, it's such a drawn out long process that it's an impossibility. And then those parents will no longer be able to use the United States for surrogacy unless we come up with some other mechanism with our government as to allow them to still use surrogacy in the United States, but have some mechanism for temporary, I don't know. We'd have to figure out what that looks like with
Yeah,
the
like a visa.
government. Almost a visa. It is, but you can't force the receiving country to take a child in. So it really is working with each of the individual countries on what their procedures are. Can we speed up those procedures in any way? How long can the intended parents sustain to be here? They should come on a visa and not an ESTA. The ESTA's too short term. We need to make sure that nobody's getting in trouble while they're here, that they're here legally, which they are. And that's the difference, versus what the true target is of the birthright citizenship problem, which is our parents aren't here illegally. They're here legally. The law allows them to use surrogacy here. We just have to change our practice on how we get people home and what mechanisms we get them home on.
When is that decision coming?
We don't know.
Okay.
So an appeal has been made on the actual issue of the actual decision. So far, all the decisions and the appeals you've heard about all had to do with injunctions of the courts saying, hey, nationwide, you can or can't have an injunction. And that's what everything's been about so far. Nothing has made it to the U.S. Supreme Court yet on the actual issue of whether or not it was legal for Trump to issue an executive order saying no birthright citizenship. So that issue has not made it there yet. It will make it there at some point. Supreme Court made statements. We can act fast. We did it before. We did it during COVID. We can make fast decisions,
Yeah.
And so the hope is it won't sit around for a whole year, but it could. We could be sitting around for a very long time waiting for a decision on this, or we could have a decision in October. I don't know.
That is so. And then for people that are pregnant right now, like would that affect pregnant? I mean, that has to be
Yes.
petrifying.
For those who are pregnant right now, we've had emergency meetings with all of them because birthright citizenship with the injunction process has come and gone for some of the states that were not participating in the lawsuits. So we've had emergency conversations with all of them about what the game plan is for all of them. Unfortunately, it could potentially create some problems, but it's
okay. Maybe that's its own
we've
podcast.
got solutions. We got things we can work on. So
yeah. Okay. It's not a complete roadblock for anybody if it does happen.
it is for some countries. It will be a complete roadblock, but the reality is, as long as we do things legal, we're following the law, we're doing the right things, and we just have to be creative for some people. So
yeah. Okay. Okay. Last question. We call it the magic wand. And people have been trying to cheat on my magic wand, say like, well, I don't have just one, I have two or three. But The magic wand will peter out after you are able to change one thing in surrogacy. So here's the question. If you had a magic wand and could change any one thing, what would be the one thing you change?
I would force insurance companies across the country to all have to cover surrogacy without discrimination against women based on their mechanism of conception. Why they're pregnant should not matter for insurance, and it should cover everything fertility onward.
Wait, explain that a little bit. So you're saying because if a surrogate chooses to get pregnant and she says that she's pregnant because she's a surrogate, they might not cover the journey?
You have some states with discrimination, yes.
Oh.
And we've got California, for example. I'm in the middle of lobbying a law change there to get rid of the discrimination. What they're doing is they're putting liens on the surrogate's compensation. If I had a magic wand, it would be IVF coverage for everybody, and it does not change or discriminate based on the fact that she's a surrogate versus an intended parent doing it for themselves on their own body.
Do clinics want insurance coverage? Because I know that would put
Oh,
some
yeah.
pressure on their rates. Oh, they do. Okay. Because more people, it would open it up for more people.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
they'd make it up in volume. Okay. And so not to be,
Which that reminds me, we left out an organization that's very important, which is Resolve,
oh
which
yeah.
is a national infertility awareness group. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so I'm not to be below board, but if a surrogate just doesn't say why she's pregnant, she's just like, I'm pregnant.
Then it could potentially be fraud. If they knew there was
Oh.
an exclusion in the surrogacy policy that says they won't cover surrogacy, which happens in quite a few places, you potentially are committing fraud against the insurance company. Yeah, you shouldn't do that.
Oh, okay. And so where is that vetted in terms of if I'm an IP, I'm relying on my agency to figure out if my surrogate has insurance.
So
And
early on, yeah, good agencies, good, and I'm weary every time I use that word agency because some believe we shouldn't use that word because
sure.
they're not regulated, but they call themselves that. So what am I going to do, But good companies will hire an insurance broker early in the process, such as Art Risk. Art Risk will go through the policy, will call the provider, ask very specific questions, and vet the policy to see if it covers or doesn't and if there's exclusions or not.
Okay. And then if people have been so impressed with what you've had to say and they want to get in touch with you, how do they find you?
Lawyersforfamilies.com. That's the easiest way, or kim@surrattlaw.com.
And you work with agencies and independents?
I work with everybody.
Yeah.
I have side projects galore everywhere. Yes, I work with everybody and everything in this world right here.
Yeah. Kim, thank you for bestowing your wisdom.
Oh, you're welcome, my friend. It was a joy.
Great.
I love having these chats with you.
Same. Thanks so much for listening to The Future of Surrogacy. If you liked today's episode, send it to a friend or a colleague that should hear it. And be sure to follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn to keep up with new episodes and behind-the-scenes updates. And if there's a topic you want us to cover or someone you think we should talk to, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. We'll see you next time.